Welcome to the Riverbend Awareness Project.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast episode are solely those of the individuals participating and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Riverbend Media Group or the Riverbend Awareness Project, its affiliates, or its employees. It is important to note that the discussion presented is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified healthcare professionals for any medical concerns or decisions. The Riverbend Awareness Project is a product of Riverbend Media Group.
Welcome back to the Riverbend Awareness Project.
Today we are talking about child abuse prevention, and we have the dynamic duo, woohoo, Julie and Shana. They are school and community counselors.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here.
To start off, would you like to just give a little introduction of yourselves and what you do as school counselors?
Sure.
Sure. I am currently in an elementary school and an online setting, and ultimately just kind of navigating some well-being for the school community and what that looks like. Also navigating resources and connections for families to benefit children.
Yep. And we also do social emotional learning with the kids, teaching them how to deal with bullying issues, helping them with coping skills, communication skills, and friendship skills, which, interestingly enough, especially since COVID, those skills have we've noticed that they've kind of gone down a little bit. In fact, some of our kindergartners coming in had to be taught how to play with other kids. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
So those are just some of the things we do.
That's really cool. So this is a pretty heavy topic. So sometimes people might not be always comfortable talking about it, but how can talking about child abuse prevention play a role in prevention?
So definitely bringing it out into the light when things are covered up. There's a lot more shame and secrecy, and there can be questions as to, like, is this actually abuse, especially with kids who are being abused. If it's not talked about, then kids can think that that is normal and that's just the way things are.
I think addressing kind of like that child safety piece where children are able to feel safe with adults that they trust and are open and feeling kind of empowered in those places to be able to talk about things that maybe somebody has said is a secret or something that they shouldn't tell, or anything in that way, because a kid knows how they feel, and a lot of times like what's feeling inappropriate or unsafe. So that safety piece is huge in their recollection, as well as being those adults that they can identify to go to. And I would just say normalizing the conversation, like making it a part of things, and because that is what it's about, like talking about it for even adults and in those places. So
Yeah. And if we don't talk about it, then people don't know what to look for. And it just becomes more of a taboo conversation.
Yeah, but recognition is critical because you need to recognize it first to be able to change it.
Yes.
So in that note, what are some ways that families and communities can work to support each other to prevent child abuse, or in the case of if they hear of child abuse, how can they react to that?
So the first thing, whenever there's suspected child abuse, is to not be afraid, to trust your own instincts. I think that's an important thing. And then there's always a lot of fear around, like, oh, what if they find out it was me who reported it? Or what will this do to our friendship? What will this do to the neighborhood? What will happen if I report this? And I think that by far is the biggest fear, just kind of what will happen if the person that you're reporting on finds out that it was you. And so with the first step would be to reach out to CPS and give a call to the Child Protective Services. And they keep it 100% anonymous. And so you can even call in and not give a name. You don't even have to say who you are. Usually they like to know how you know the child and how you know the information that you know, just because that helps with them identifying the problem and being able to deal with it the best way that they can. But something else that I would say about that is that I've had to report on people that I love and people that I care about in the past, and they found out that it was me. And I can't say this is 100% all the time what will happen, but they were angry with me for probably about a month. And then they realized that I had made a good decision and that it actually helped their family. And so I know that that's probably the biggest thing, is the fear.
Yeah, definitely. And then I love that you kind of brought up that community piece, because that's essential to kind of navigating a lot of these issues, because when we're aware of who we're around and what's happening in just our community, whether that be like your church community, your school community, your neighborhood, your parent groups, anything like that, just navigating that so that people have that sense of community and are able to feel comfortable and confident in those places to be like, hey, this isn't okay, and I need to let somebody know. But also on the opposite end of that is building that support system for children, families, guardians, things like that, because parenting is hard. It's difficult, and we're not meant to live this life alone. And it's a huge piece of all of us kind of taking a collective responsibility for our overall well-being.
How can we take action to support families in our community so that the kids in those families can thrive?
My biggest is being involved, educating yourself if you are unsure, and erring on the side of caution, because it's not your job to determine if something is a detriment to somebody or if it's this big ordeal. There are government institutions and programming and things set up to navigate for you. But just being a concerned citizen is free game. And I think just that piqued curiosity for yourself, as well as seeing that well-being for others, is a huge piece of that.
Yeah, I think another part that is sometimes missing in today's world is just getting to know your neighbors, reaching out. And, I know that we're all busy and we all have our own lives and everything, but that's something that can be like an incredible protective factor against child abuse, is just being aware of your neighbors and noticing when things are different with kids. If you notice that your neighbors' kids are out playing, and they're usually out playing every day, and then all of a sudden you don't see them for a while, or you notice that maybe they're looking like disheveled, or you're noticing bruises, just like being aware of your neighbors and trying to be friendly and trying to reach out and offering support if you feel comfortable, like offering to help a young mother with her children. I think that that's a big thing that we kind of have missing in our society that we used to have, that we're kind of left to raise our kids alone, especially if we don't have family in the area. But just reaching out and offering, hey, I can go get groceries for you, or maybe your kids can play with my kids. Just offering that and having that kind of support, that can be a huge preventative factor for child abuse.
You mentioned protective factors. Are there any other protective factors in protecting children?
Yes, there are many protective factors. You want to talk about them? She made a list.
I did. Protective factors are huge because it's kind of expansive and includes all the pieces that we've kind of brought up. And a lot of things are encouraging, like family attachments, like that parent, guardian, child attachment, and what that looks like in the way that they are able to interact with each other. And a lot of times in a lot of family counseling and things, that's what you're working towards, is to better those relationships so that somebody can feel comfortable being like, hey, mom, this is what's going on. Grandma, aunt, whoever, this is what's happening. Other pieces of that are like access to mental health care, substance use treatment, things that kind of are pieces of that bigger puzzle. So if we are able to access those resources and navigate things that maybe we don't know or haven't been privy to, that allow us the space to explore that, increases that communication and that ability to address significant issues that maybe have been secretive for generations. Also, supportive networks. So building that community piece, having social interactions, having connections for your community, for children, for adults, for teens, and accessing that regularly. So it feels like it's just a piece of your life. And then my other is like things that are creations of stability, whatever that means, like having housing, having appropriate clothing for seasons, making sure that you have food. That's a huge piece, because when we are at some of our breaking points, a lot of what we know and what we feel kind of goes out the window because we're just in a survival mode. And it can definitely take over and curb some of our better processing. And with that comes like education, simply parents having outlets to navigate issues that they are learning, because parenting doesn't come with a manual. And sometimes when you have difficult issues in your family that you are facing, or, neurodivergent tendencies, and navigating all of that, it is super imperative to not feel alone. And building up those networks just increases that support base. So kind of that in-between place where you have a spot to be like, I'm really struggling. Whereas sometimes it feels like I can't say that out loud.
And just kind of to put in, as I'm listening to Julie, a plug for school counselors. If anybody is wondering where they can go to get resources, I mean, you can Google anything, but also another great place to get resources is to ask your child's school counselor. And we can get people hooked up with pretty much, if we can't help them with something, if we can't get them something, we usually know a resource who will be able to get them hooked up with whatever they need. And at our school, I know that we are able to hook kids up with coats and boots and hats and gloves and weekend food bags and other like emergency boxes of food. And we can connect them with like help with paying their gas or electric bill. And then we've got other resources for like housing and for places to go during domestic things that might be happening. And so school counselors are a great resource. Also, anything, that's why it's really important to get involved also in the community with whatever you like, whatever your family likes, if like sports or church, anything in the community, anytime you have more people around you and you're involved, that's going to be help, and that's going to be a protective factor. And that's just knowing more people, that just helps with the resources and getting your family or another family that you might know the things that they need.
So like just expanding that network
Yes.
of support,
Yes.
and people will know different resources that
Yes.
someone else wouldn't know, and sharing in that.
Absolutely. And it's like school counselors, but if you are seeing somebody in the community, like they have access to a multitude of resources as well. And so it's really navigating those connections that you have in a supportive way.
We kind of talked about that already, but are there other barriers? You talked about the fear of people getting angry for reporting abuse. Are there other barriers that might prevent people from reporting, and how can those be overcome?
I think another one might just be not wanting to get involved. Just worrying that if once you get involved, you'll be pulled in farther, or that some people just want to kind of mind their own business. But if, it's your neighbors or people that you see, I mean, if you have knowledge about some sort of child abuse, then it's, usually somebody who's in your sphere, whether it's someone you live by, someone you work with. But by not getting involved, that will be more problematic in the end. And Julie's actually got some statistics as to kind of, I was talking about your, how many reports were made and how many.
Yeah. So the most recent statistics in the state of Idaho show that there were over 21,000 referrals for maltreatment, is what is kind of the umbrella in the state of inclusive of like medical neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And there's kind of a waiver on mental emotional abuse because it isn't necessarily something that is seen or outright. And with that, 7,465 of those reports were screened through CPS. And with that comes like an extensive amount of, whether it be like child on child abuse or perpetrated by adults. And the majority of it, I believe about close to 75%, is within the sphere of who children know. And so that kind of brings with it like this other piece of navigating, who who you're around, who your children are around, and what that looks like. And not always just accepting what is presented to you.
Yeah. And I thought the other statistic that was interesting, how many end in death.
Yeah. So per 100,000 children in the state, there's about 1.5 deaths per year. So here we're at like 8 to 10 a year from direct abuse, whatever that might be, like neglectful parenting where, kids might not have food or be able to get medical attention. But then there's also like the physicalities of abuse. And there's been a lot in the news and different things that we've seen repeatedly. And a lot of that, when it goes unnoticed or unreported, does ultimately end in some pretty dangerous and gnarly situations that children do succumb to.
And I think like not wanting to get involved, and then like the fear of what will happen if it's somebody that you care about that you're reporting on. Something that I failed to mention, when we talk about CPS, a lot of people get afraid and they're like, imagine children being taken away and things like that. But the number one goal of CPS is to keep families together. And just from personal experience, as I've watched different families, worked with different families in the community and at the school, it usually takes about 3 years to have a child removed if the abuse continues. And so people are worried about like, oh, if I make this report, then like whoever you're reporting on, they're going to get their child removed. But that doesn't happen like that, and it takes a lot more than one call usually. But CPS's main goal is to keep the family together and to get the family help and resources, and like getting them into anger management classes, parenting classes, to work on communication skills, and just to kind of be that person that, to be somebody that they can be accountable to make sure that the family is progressing and, healing and avoiding turning to abuse for solutions. And that's the other thing that I kind of think about, because 2 in 100,000 that's not acceptable at all. And if we don't get involved, if we feel like, oh, I don't want to get involved, or I'm afraid, or whatever, abuse is something that escalates. If nothing comes in to stop it, if there's no person, if there's not any entity that steps in and is like, we need to stop the direction that this is going, it's just going to continue to escalate. And so I think that's the most important reason to step in.